Hello, hello, 皆さん、こんにちは. My name is Yoshi Domoto. I'm the Executive Director of the Japan America Society of Georgia. I'm so thrilled that you are joining us today for our special program, The Impact of Geostrategy on U.S.-Japan Relations. Japan is actually Georgia's #1 foreign investor, as over 600 Japanese companies operate in our state, and these companies employ about 40,000 people. And these companies have also invested about $11 billion in our Georgia's economy. So certainly there's a lot going on between Japan and Georgia. In the Japan America Society, we host a variety of programming and events around business, cultural exchange, education, public affairs, and social networking. And of course, today's event is an example of our public affairs offering. We are so thrilled to have this timely webinar and also in-person event. But before we begin, we would like to certainly thank all of our sponsors for today's program. Of course, this program wouldn't be possible without the support from the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. So thank you very much. And also the National Association of Japan America Societies, NAJAS. As I mentioned just briefly, this is a hybrid event. So actually, we are broadcasting online, but also there are two in-person events happening here in Atlanta. One is here at Georgia Tech Cyber, which is a Center for International Business Education and Research, part of the Georgia Tech Scheller College of Business. And then also Hotel Indigo Vining. So hello to everyone joining us in person and also online throughout the US and also from Japan as well. But at this time, we'd like to introduce to you our good friend and the president of the National Association of Japan American Societies, Mr. Peter Kelly. Peter, yoroshiku onegai shimasu.
I saw a cherry tree outside of the Federal Reserve Bank, which we haven't seen quite yet in up north. But this is we thank the Japan American Society of Georgia for doing this hybrid event. It takes a lot of work to do a hybrid event. We have an in-person group here at Georgia Tech, but also an online group. Thank you all for joining. There are 38 Japan American Societies located all around North America. All of them are locally funded, locally managed organizations, not-for-profit organizations, which work to improve the relationship between their area and Japan at the local level. It's the strongest network, private network supporting a bilateral relationship that the United States has. The NAJAS, where I work, our work is to offer Japan-related programming to our members that they might not be able to organize on their own. We offer 6 different series, one public affairs, a geostrategy series, 2 business speaker series, a cultural series, and a security series. Many of you here at the Japan American Society of Georgia know those programs because Yoshi Domoto and the Japan American Society of Georgia staff do such a great job competing for our grants that you've hosted almost all of those programs and probably will host a few more in the future. Tonight's is the Geostrategy and the Grassroots program. Our partner in this program is the Sasakawa Peace Foundation in Tokyo. We began this program in partnership with Sasakawa Peace Foundation 4 years ago because we wanted to take the kind of geostrategic discussion that happens in Washington, D.C. all the time and in Tokyo and make it available to audiences outside of those cities. So what we did is to pair, for each event, there is a Japanese expert and an American expert who discuss the geostrategic challenges that both countries face in Asia. There are 8 of these events taking place in the first 3 months of this year at different Japan America societies, 8 different pairs of speakers. This is the 6th of 8. If you're particularly interested, you can join in tomorrow morning in Pittsburgh at 8 a.m. where there's another event taking place there as well. But we really hope that this event is helpful to all of you who know Japan very well as an investor here in Georgia, but broadening the understanding of an American view and a Japanese view of the geostrategic challenges that both countries face at this important time. Our partner in this event, as I mentioned, is the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. And I want to introduce now Dr. Atsushi Tsunami, who will be speaking to us from Rome. That is not Rome up the road here in not Rome, Georgia, but Rome in the other Rome, the one that was named after Rome, Georgia. And Dr. Tsunami, hopefully you will be able to join us and offer a few remarks.
Thank you, Peter. This is a great honor for the Sasakawa Peace Foundation to co-sponsor this program and the U.S.-Japan Association in Asia. And thank you very much for joining us today. And I'm speaking from Rome in Italy because as we understand it, there's a situation going on after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And the Sasakawa Peace Foundation is trying to establish a program to help the refugees coming out of the Ukraine in Poland. And we have summit meetings coming in few days in Brussels. And I understand the President Biden is also joining our Prime Minister from Japan. And this is a very important time to have a discussion of the future of U.S.-Japan cooperation, particularly in as probably the two distinguished speakers today, Professor Matsuda and of course the Boni, the Jama Marshall Fund, be focusing on the issue of Asia and looking at the China, and I think. After with this experience of Russia's invasion to this extent, something that we never. I have in our foundation we have a few experts on Russian affairs, and they have always been giving me this information that Russia would never to this extent. To have the kind of military invasion to the entire Ukraine. This is something that was really, to me, was very surprising. And my friends that I was talking to here in Italy or any EU counterparts, we are all surprised and to see this happening. And the issue in Japan, in the U.S.-Japan, today is really about also how this translated into the China's thinking of or understanding of this Russian invasion in Ukraine. So it's that we need to understand what the China is understanding from this experience. And this is something that I think is very important for today's meeting, to have two experts from US and Japan talking about this. And so I'm very excited and very delighted to have this event hosted by the U.S.-Japan Association in Georgia, and hopefully we can take this as a very important lesson and translate and deliver to my meetings, I guess, tomorrow and in Brussels, and see what we can do to have the kind of new way of thinking of how we can, U.S. and Japan, cooperate in bringing the peace and stability in the world. And this is something that we need to work on. And it's a very new challenge, but I'm looking forward to the discussions that will be delivered from the two experts from today's discussion. Thank you very much. And our foundation, of course, is very much appreciate this kind of a dialogue between US and Japan, and looking forward to today's session. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Tsunami, and thank you for joining all the way from Rome, Italy. Hopefully you can visit us in Rome, Georgia at some point too, when the next time you're in Georgia. But we appreciate all of the support from the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, not only with this program, but the entire series and various other U.S.-Japan network organizations. But at this time, we would like to kind of get into our program, and we have such a wonderful program scheduled for you. We really appreciate our panelists coming in from Washington, D.C. and also from Japan, but First, we have Ms. Bonnie Glaser. Bonnie is the director of the Asia program at the German Marshall Fund of the United States. Before her current role, she was previously a senior advisor for the Asia and the director of the China Power Project at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. So Bonnie-san, if you want to get us started and give us a brief overview of kind of the geostrategic impact between United States and Asia and what's going on today in the world.
Well, thank you, Yoshi-san, and I want to thank the Japan-America Society in Georgia and the Sasakawa Peace Foundation and NIJAS for inviting me to speak with you today. When I started my career long ago in the 1980s, the central geopolitical configuration in the world was the US-Soviet-China triangle. After the Soviet Union collapsed, there was really very little attention paid to China-Russia relations. Some observers raise concerns about developments in the relationship periodically, I think beginning about maybe 10, 15 years ago. But the dominant view was that the relationship was a marriage of convenience, that the differences between China and Russia were greater than the issues that might drive them together. And so many people predicted that there might even be growing friction, that China would treat Russia as a junior partner and that Russia would not want to be the junior partner. People predicted that the two countries would come to loggerheads in Central Asia, in the Arctic, highlighted different approaches to, for example, India and Vietnam. But it has become clear to me that in the Russia-China relationship, there has been this ability, particularly, of course, by the top leaders, who have now met 38 times, Putin and Xi Jinping. They've had this uncanny ability to compartmentalize their differences, and their common interests have grown and their worldviews have converged. So if it was ever true that there was a marriage of convenience between Russia and China, that is no longer true today. I believe that we are at a major geopolitical juncture globally, but in Asia as well. You know, the Ukraine war is a shock, not only for Europe, but I think also for the Indo-Pacific. And countries around the world have responded with unity of purpose, especially, of course, democracies. They have condemned Russia's invasion and decided that they will impose sanctions that are truly unprecedented to make Putin pay a cost for the atrocities that he is committing on a daily basis in Ukraine. And the rapidity within which the US, Europe, Japan, and other countries imposed these sanctions and demonstrated a willingness to incur costs was really unprecedented. The war, I think, has posed a major challenge for Xi Jinping and his foreign policy. So I want to talk just a little bit about China. I think China has three main interests in this war, which are in conflict. The first is to preserve good relations with Russia, because Xi Jinping very much values this relationship with Putin. In their worldview, the United States is in decline. They want to work together to further diminish US influence in the world. And they want to promote an international order that is more favorable toward autocracies. So we all saw in the 5,300 word joint statement that they signed on February 4th, the true breadth and depth of that Russia-China relationship. And it contains some things that are frankly new. Russia in the past has not explicitly condemned the NATO alliance. China has not condemned the NATO alliance. China has always been concerned about US alliances in Asia. Since the mid-1990s, Chinese have called them Cold War relics. But US alliances in Europe were really not top concerns for China. But now we hear the Chinese say that it's the 5 waves of NATO enlargement that are to blame for this conflict. So China to date has not condemned the invasion. It doesn't use that word. It says that Russia has legitimate security interests that should be protected. China abstained at the United Nations, but notably just a few days ago, it vetoed the provisional order that was issued by the International Court of Justice alongside only one other country, and that, of course, was Russia. The second interest China has is upholding territorial integrity and sovereignty. China is uncomfortable when countries use force, particularly to threaten another country's territorial integrity and sovereignty. And let's be clear, China has a good relationship with Ukraine, not only politically, but also economically. And territorial integrity and sovereignty have always been core parts of what China values in its foreign policy. So it doesn't want to have this it doesn't want to have to violate this commitment, and it continues to speak out in support of territorial integrity and sovereignty. And then the third interest is to prevent a dramatic negative impact on China's relations with the United States, with Europe, with other countries that comprise the Western world and advanced countries that have technology that China still needs access to. China wants to become one of the, perhaps the dominant power in many areas of technology. It's not prepared yet to take that role. And so it needs to continue to have access to advanced economies. And China, of course, is very much a globalized country and very interconnected with the global economy. So it needs to maintain these relationships. So we know that last Friday, President Biden met with Xi Jinping, and Biden's main message to President Xi Jinping was that there will be serious consequences if China provides material support to Russia's economy or its military. This goes beyond sanctions violation, by the way. The Chinese, I believe, will comply with the sanctions, their banks and their certainly state-owned enterprises. But the question is, will they try to circumvent the sanctions and provide some assistance? We've seen this, of course, in the case of North Korea and Iran, where there has been some sanctions violations in the past. But the United States is really making this a litmus test of the future US-China relationship. So as China, as I said, doesn't want to be forced to choose among these interests, we cannot say it is neutral, and it is not qualified to mediate, even though some people have invited it to do so, because it is not objective. China is, in fact, leaning toward Russia. So neither the US, China, nor Japan want to see a new Cold War, but that is one potential outcome of this war. If Xi Jinping opts to help Russia, as I said, US-China relations will seriously deteriorate, and other countries will be expected to join in if the United States does declare secondary sanctions on China. And this is, actions are being prepared as we speak to do this in the event that China does take actions to significantly support Russia. So the outcome of the war is uncertain. It has only been going on for 1 month. I'm sure we all wish it would come to an end, but my expectation is that it will drag on for some time. It may be premature to draw lessons, but I think at least one lesson is clear, that democracies are under threat and US alliances are more important than ever. And the US-Japan relationship is more important than ever. Not just regionally in the Indo-Pacific, but globally. So I look forward to the discussion, to the questions, and thank you again for inviting me.
Well, thank you so much, Vani-san. Those were wonderful insights. But to join you, your partner, I think you worked with him before. We also have, by way of California and Japan, Professor Yasuhiro Matsuda. Matsuda Sensei is a professor of international politics at the Institute for Advanced Studies on Asia, which is part of University of Tokyo. He received his PhD in the law Graduate School of Law at Keio University in Tokyo, and he spent 16 years in the National Institute for Defense Studies as a part of the Japan Defense Agency. So with a virtual round of applause, let's also welcome Matsuda Sensei. Matsuda Sensei, can you give us a overview about kind of the Japanese perspective, kind of the geostrategies and the impact it has on the world today?
Yeah, thank you very much for your kind introduction. And thank you, Peter-san and Tsunami Sensei. Thank you very much for having me here. I feel very honored to have an opportunity to join this very exciting, roundtable. Well, following Bonnie-san's great presentation, I'd like to discuss a little bit more about Japan and Japan-US relations and Japan-US alliance especially. And firstly, I think that after the DPJ government, basically Japan-US relations as a whole and also alliance has been in a very good shape. In most of the time, Prime Minister Abe ran the government, and I think he's a kind of genius of diplomacy. He could deal with both President Obama and President Biden. President Trump, and these two are totally opposite characters. But he could do this, and not only dealing with the United States difficult politics. But also he could change Japan's own policy framework of the national security. He has made a very big change in for example, lifting the ban on the collective self-defense right in 2015 and began to increase the amount of the defense budget in his term. And these are very, good, policies in terms of dealing with the threats surrounding Japan and also coping with the United States. And now Prime Minister Kishida is running the government, and he is very a stable person, but not a rigid person. And by watching his countermeasures to the COVID-19, the general public in Japan feel that he's flexible, both stable and flexible, and doing relatively well. So I think that as for President Biden, he's a very good counterpart. So far, so good. And as for Japan's security concerns, there are many different concerns. Japan is surrounded by China, North Korea, and Russia. It's not UK. UK is surrounded by its allies. Although they are all island nations, Japan is surrounded by China, North Korea, and Russia. And Japan's security concern has the order or concerns have been changed over time. But now maybe China is the first, then North Korea and Russia. And Japan's concern over China is basically Senkaku Islands, especially China legislated new Coast Guard law last year. So the danger of actual, use of force near Senkaku is quite close. It's not a very peaceful situation. The pressure coming from China is heightening. And then Taiwan. Taiwan is a direct neighbor of Japan, and Xi Jinping government has a very positive and aggressive policies toward Taiwan. And China itself is strengthening its military capability very rapidly. And then East China Sea and South China Sea. So Hong Kong, Xinjiang, and Tibet are, relatively, in the back scene. But every time something happens, for example, Hong Kong becomes the first burner or something like that. Toward, the North Korea, it's nuclear development, missile development, and abduction issue. These three are the major concerns, and these three need U.S. cooperation as well. And Russia is the third. And major concern about Russia used to be, support to China. So in some Japan's strategists, they once thought that how to drive a wedge between China and Russia. But as Bonnie said before, it's gone. It's not a reality. Russia and China are combined very closely, and now Russia has become the first, and the imminent security concern for Japan and the rest of the world. Let me briefly introduce Japan's reaction. It was a big shock. Although Japan was informed by the United States that Russia would invade into Ukraine, but the scale and also the outcome, of course, it's still ongoing, the outcome of the invasion was still out of our expectation. And the Kishida administration made a very quick sanction against Russia. And there is one analysis that it is quite lucky that Prime Minister Abe stepped down 2 years ago, because he had a very close relations with President Putin, and he promoted a lot of joint economic development projects in the Russian Far East. So it could be quite difficult for Prime Minister Abe to turn it in a very quick speed if he is still in the government. But Kishida is different. Kishida is quite tactical about how to show himself is different from Prime Minister Abe. He's very good at doing this always. So he could do this very quickly. But the poor individual companies that they were requested by the Japanese government to join the many projects, but now Japanese government made a decision to do sanctions. So they are in a very difficult position. And there are in the public there are two different reactions. One is traditional pacifist reactions, no war. And the war is really horrible, and this kind of reactions have been done for many years, and it's a quite a usual reaction. But there are more realist reactions in Japanese public. It means that if we witness Russia's naked invasion toward its neighboring countries, and also Russian military's behavior is so shocking, targeting the civilian people. It's an intentionally targeting civilian people, and the tens of more than 10 million refugees are flooding both inside and outside of Ukraine, and this is a very shocking, scene. So more realist reactions can be seen. So I think that the Kishida administration is preparing for the next upper house election in coming July. I think that basically conservative government is likely to be winning, both in the ruling party and the opposition parties. There are some conservatives in the oppositions. I think that the defense budget is likely to increase because of this. So this is a direct, reactions. And also there is a kind of chain reactions. In Japan, there is a rising concern about possible contingency in Taiwan Strait. In Mainichi Shimbun, there is an opinion poll. I saw that exact number was maybe 88%. Maybe, yeah, 88%, almost 90% of the Japanese public are worried about, China's invasion toward Taiwan in the future. So I think that this concern is going to be real. So as for the policy course, I think that a more conservative and realist way of thinking will prevail. And there is also a big concern about Japanese economic engagement toward China, not only Russia, because if China is really thinking about use of force against Taiwan, for example, 10 years from now, I think that the Japanese firms will also face the same questions, which are now facing in terms of Russia. And also China is supporting Russia now. So the Japanese firms are concerning about their own reputation cost of staying in Russia and also in China. So as Bonnie said, that a secondary sanction toward China is on the table. People began to discuss that. I think that this move will cool down the Japanese investors in China. So the Ukraine war on Ukraine is changing the Japanese discussions in its security policy, actual defense budget, and also its engagement with Russia and even China. This is my current view. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Matsuda Sensei. That was a great overview about maybe the Japanese perspective of what's happening in the world. But at this point, we'd like to go into maybe a spitfire panel discussion for both of you and for all of our audience members online and in person. If you do have questions, we have a Q&A session towards the end of the program. So feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A button for all of you tuning in online. And then for all of our audience members in person, you will definitely have a chance to ask the questions in person as well. So Bonnie-san, after hearing Matsuda Sensei's overview, is Russia's war on Ukraine a wake-up call for Japan and other countries in the Indo-Pacific? How could it underscore the importance of alliances to countries like Japan?
Well, it is interesting that some countries, I think, were shocked by Russia's use of force, but there are those that were not. I can tell you Poland, the Baltic states, those countries have had their own experiences with the former Soviet Union and have predicted that this was going to come. Secondly, as Matsuda-san said, the US government did share with its allies, not only the information that Russia was going to invade, but a map of what that invasion was going to look like. And it turned out to be incredibly accurate about where those forces were going to be inserted. And I think the one thing that the US, of course, did not predict accurately was the very poor performance of Russia's forces, which is interesting to note. There have been entire units that have laid down their arms. There's been equipment that hasn't functioned properly. Of course, morale is so much higher among the Ukrainian forces. But I really do think that, as I said in my remarks, that the main message for me, the lesson that comes out of this, is the importance of alliances. I certainly hope that China is drawing that lesson, because they have long believed that they can drive wedges in in our alliances. And they say, like NATO should have been disbanded, after the Soviet Union collapsed. Well, obviously, these are voluntary alliances. There is no country that is having its arm twisted. This is because countries see that we have shared interests, that we are stronger together, that we share values. We share an interest in the rule of law, in peaceful resolution of disputes. We share interests in free markets. The list is so long. And so I think that this is really the lesson about how we have to work together to strengthen the international system, which has protected our interests for so long. But there are areas that need updating, take like the World Trade Organization. It just doesn't deal with so many developments in technology and digital trade, for example. So there's a lot of areas that I think we really do need to update. We need to ensure that our multilateral trade agreements are very high quality, that protect the environment and labor, et cetera. I myself am a huge backer of CPTPP and hope that the United States will eventually resolve our political problems, because that's really what it is, in my view, is it's a political problem. And as the Biden administration emphasizes a trade policy for the middle class, it's struggling with how to sell this, to the middle class. But there's no doubt, in my view, that it serves our strategic interests. So there's so much that the US and Japan are doing together, but of course, more that we can do.
Great, thank you very much. And Matsuda-sensei, I know you talked about this a little bit in your overview. What do Prime Minister Kishida's administration, how concerned are they that something similar that's happening in Ukraine could happen in East Asia, in Taiwan, for instance? And then the people of Japan, do they have kind of similar concerns, or is there a difference between the concerns government-wise and then I guess from the grassroots, from citizens of Japan?
Most of the experts on China-Taiwan issues don't think that the Taiwan Strait, contingency would not happen very soon. It's a much more midterm or long-term issue because basically China is not that capable to do full invasion, because if that's a military provocation type use of force, it is easy. They can do that tomorrow. But if they actually want to unify the country by use of force, it should be a full invasion and also occupy the island and also establish the new government and rule the whole island for many years. And in the meantime, they have to secure their logistical support. That's quite a high bar. So basically, it's not today's or tomorrow's issue. It's much more. They need more time, and especially we have witnessed the sanctions and also Russian-based military technologies poor performance. And so I think that the war planners in China are thinking about their time frame to do such a military operation, rethink the time frame of the operation. But there is one more concern, because President Biden has declared that he would not fight the World War III in a very early stage, because Russia has nuclear weapons and China also has nuclear weapons. So if China is determined to use nuclear weapons for deterrence usage against U.S. Possible intervention to Taiwan contingency, I think that it may work. That kind of concern is also rising. So I think that the concerns about U.S. Extended deterrence is now on the table. It's a really serious situation. So these are the expert, the concerns in the expert. But in the public, there are so many, different discussions. And as I introduced a little while ago, public opinion shows that if same thing happens in Taiwan, what should we do? What will the world do? That's very vague, but public opinions, major concern. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Well, Bonnie-san, back to you. So you have, I think, very unique perspective on the Ukraine-Russia relationship, what's currently happening through your work at the German Marshall Fund. Can you share insights from kind of Germany and the other parts of Europe, kind of the European perspective of what's happening?
Well, the shock of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which was a shock certainly to Western Europe, I think it's shaken Europe's democracies out of their complacency about geopolitical risks. In Germany, in particular, there has been a seismic shift in its policies. Some of you may have watched Chancellor Scholz's speech to the Bundestag. And that is where he announced a decision to halt the opening of Nord Stream 2, to permanently increase defense spending to more than 2% of GDP per year, to supply weapons to Kyiv, which is unprecedented for Germany, and to allow Germany's armed forces to arm their drones. These decisions were all unimaginable before the war. In its energy policies, although Europe, of course, is not going to completely go to zero in the importation of energy from Russia. The US can do that. Only 3.5% of our energy comes from Russia. But Europe is going to accelerate its shift to renewables. They recognize the need to reduce dependence on Russian gas. Even as there is consensus that Europe should be strengthened, I think there are still differences about how that should be achieved. Northern countries want to rely on national resources and existing EU budgets, while France and Italy, for example, are pushing for more EU funding. And there are differences on how important the Indo-Pacific is for Europe. I think countries like France and Germany, the UK, probably the Netherlands are really quite clear about the importance of the Indo-Pacific, France being at the top of that list because it is a resident power. But countries that are closer to Russia, like the Baltic states, I think they're understandably far more focused on Russia. The Indo-Pacific seems quite far away and not as relevant to their interest. But the EU did come out last year with a very important Indo-Pacific strategy paper. They now have an implementation document about how they're going to advance their interests. And now that the Biden administration has released its Indo-Pacific strategy, there's a lot of coordination about how we're going to work together in very, very concrete ways. And of course, NATO will be strengthened. I think it is now seen as vital, and tensions between the US and Europe that existed under the Trump administration are pretty much behind us. They could return. There are still worries, I think, in European capitals about the possibility of another Trump-like presidency or Trump himself returning to power. They're still concerned about potential US disengagement from Europe. But these things are now pretty much on the shelf. And then finally, I just say that the war is redrawing politics in Europe. It has brought the EU's Eastern and Western members closer together in some ways, as countries are cooperating, for example, to deliver military aid to Ukraine, and as their opinions converge on the need to contain Russia. and implement sanctions. And that's good for Europe. I think that's it'll be very positive for Europe going forward. As you know, the EU comprising 27 countries, it's difficult to get these countries to agree on things. And perhaps in some areas going forward, that will be a bit easier.
Great, thank you very much. Matsuda Sensei, now to you. Let's talk about Japanese Prime Minister kind of relationships with American presidents. There were 3 US presidents during Prime Minister Abe's tenure, 2 presidents during Prime Minister Suga's tenure. How do you characterize Prime Minister Kishida's relationship with President Biden right now? And how do you think it will kind of develop over the next 2 years or more?
Well, I think that basically Prime Minister Kishida is a very, very lucky guy. And he was foreign minister for 5 years under Prime Minister Abe. And Prime Minister Abe can perform very well. He is a very good at doing communications. And Prime Minister Suga is the kind of opposite. He is not a great communicator. So if Kishida runs the government immediately following Abe, he is doomed. he could be doomed. But he followed Prime Minister Suga, who was not a great communicator. So it looks like very good, both in domestically and also internationally. So basically, I think that his communication, he is very well experienced as a foreign minister with President Biden is very good. And also, he is very stable. He is a very stable person. He has no surprise, basically. So it is that's a minimum requirement, and he also can communicate. So, but I'm sorry, I don't know them personally. But based on my understanding through the media, I think that's very good. And if he can win the election in the coming upper house election in July, I think that he is going to have a very stable 3 years in the next 3 years. So, or in many ways, he's a very lucky person to have a good stable relation with the United States. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Well, Bonnie-san, back to you. So speaking of, President Biden, the Biden administration recently released its Indo-Pacific strategy report, outlining how it plans to deal with China and to better secure and improve the region for the international community. Can you discuss this strategy, what it all entails, and how does U.S.-Japan relations and other partnerships fit in with the plan?
Well, I think the U.S. vision for the region has been clear for some time. And if you go back even and look at the Trump administration's Indo-Pacific strategy, you'll find there's a lot of consistency. So the Biden administration is building on what the Trump administration put out and its objectives. Some of the ways and means are different. The objectives are really quite similar. And this vision is something that I think the United States really drew from. I don't want to say copy from, but it was inspired by Prime Minister Abe, and Japan. This vision of a free, open, connected, prosperous, secure, and resilient Indo-Pacific. Those are the words that are used in the Indo-Pacific strategy. And I think we all hear those words and we say, yes, that's exactly the kind of region we all want to have. And so those 5 objectives, the strategy notes, will be pursued in concert with US allies and partners. So there is recognition that the United States cannot achieve these goals alone. And there's also expectation that other countries will join with the United States to achieve them. So we need others to step up and contribute. And of course, Japan is doing that. We are seeing this to some extent not only bilaterally, but also within the Quad, where we've now had several leaders meetings at the Quad level and looking forward to the next one in person in Tokyo. And the strategy explicitly says that the US seeks to shape the environment around China to influence China's policies through cooperation with allies and partners. So this is a difference from the Trump administration, which I think really had sought to change China's political system. I remember when former Secretary of State Pompeo gave a speech to the, I think it was at the Reagan Library, and he made the statement that the United States wants to embolden the Chinese people to induce changes in China. That's as close as we have had any senior official in a U.S. administration say that he wanted to overthrow the Chinese Communist Party, and that has disappeared from the Biden administration. The emphasis is on shaping the environment. So the ways are about building, as I said, collective capacity. It's about working with allies. So examples would include advancing common approaches to critical and emerging technologies, the internet and cyberspace, again, strengthening the Quad, which is very much focused on transnational threats like global health and climate, delivering public goods, particularly to ASEAN and the Pacific. I think those are the two areas that are really of focus. That begins with providing vaccines to Southeast Asian countries. And then in the security realm, to reinforce deterrence and counter coercion. And this, I think, includes helping other countries bolster maritime capacity, protect countries' resources and the rights of sovereign nations at sea. So there's a lot of I think, agenda items that need to be further concretized, made into very specific efforts to work jointly with allies. But that's what's going on now. As I said, they're writing this implementation strategy now in the White House, and they're very much in touch with countries both in the Indo-Pacific and Europe who have an interest in working together to advance these 5 goals in the Indo-Pacific region.
Great, thank you so much. Well, speaking of alliances, Matsuda Sensei, with all that's happening around the world, why is U.S.-Japan relations so important? I think you spoke about this a little bit, but can you elaborate how U.S.-Japan relations can shape our world in the future? And what are some of the key things that America can learn from Japan and also Japan can learn from the U.S.?
Well, that's a very good question. And why U.S.-Japan alliance is very important. Firstly, geography. Japan is the best location for the U.S. military to extend its power. If U.S. wants to send its military capability, for example, naval power from the mainland, that is going to take 2 weeks to reach the region. But the U.S. military forces can stay in the region, and also Japan is a very good host nation, and which shares the same value, and the economic level and technology level are very high, so that the maintenance of the U.S. forces, can be done in a very good way in Japan, and they don't have to go back to the United States. So as an alliance, this is a very good, alliance, and also so it is a kind of key for the free world, the stability, peace and stability and prosperity of the free world, especially in the Indo-Pacific region. And also, as for Japan, Japan is surrounded by many threatening countries, and the situation is worsening. So Japan will have to, strengthen its, alliance with the United States. And one is the learning point. Anyway, that Japan has to prepare for more actual, war fighting. It means that Japan has to strengthen its deterrence capability, because the Japanese self-defense forces are very good in training and peaceful and operations in the peacetime. But for example, Japan's base resiliency is very bad, not enough at all. For example, most of the Japan's air bases don't have bunkers, and it is very vulnerable to the ballistic missile attacks. So the Japan has to pour much more money to build base resiliencies. Second, offensive capabilities. Japan's power structure is pretty much defensive. There is a role, division of labor between Japan and the United States. But Japan should have more offensive capabilities and survivability of the offensive capability is also very important. If we take a look at what's happening in Ukraine, if the Ukraine military power is diminished by the first wave attack by the Russian missile attacks, then they couldn't survive at all, right? But Japan's current situation is very vulnerable. So survivable, air power and offensive capability is necessary, and also naval power. So people say that Japan is very weak in cyberspace, outer space, and microwave, and so on. But Japan has many weak points, and if Japan is determined to strengthen and cover those weak points, I think that Japan can directly strengthen the alliance immediately. So I think that it's Japan's turn to do more things. I think as a Japanese expert, I have to highlight this point. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And before we go into the Q&A portion with our audience, just one final question for both of you is, what advice do you have for young people, students, or people who are shaping our world in the future? How can they build a more peaceful environment throughout the world with all that's happening? Do you have any advice for our young people and young viewers right now?
You want me to go first?
Sure, please, Pani-san.
Okay, I'll be brief. You can come be my intern. We do hire interns at GMF, and love to have the students that are working for us. We have people who work for us virtually as well. Now that I think the pandemic has led everybody to appreciate the fact how you don't always have to have somebody in the room to work for you. But my general advice is you get involved, join young leaders programs, find issues that you're passionate about, whether it's climate change or securing peace in the Taiwan Strait or strengthening alliances. Learn foreign languages and cultures and understand how others view the world. Try to put yourself in another country's shoes. Don't look at the world through the lens of the country that you live in, because there are so many other perspectives in the world. It's really important to understand them. And if you're an American, please do strengthen our democracy. It's probably one of the most important and pressing challenges that we face.
Wonderful message. Thank you so much. Masuda-sensei, anything to add? Any advice for young people?
Yeah, and the University of Tokyo welcome you. But joking aside, I think that making more international friends, is a very important thing. And if you are available, learn more foreign languages, not only Japanese but Chinese as well, or Russian or whatever. If you learn multiple languages, you will know the complexity. You will understand the complexity of the world. And in my case, I learned, English and Chinese Mandarin when I was very young, and I work by using these two languages. And I think that Chinese people are very good friends, but there are some problems. But even if the countries have got some troubles, I think that a friendship among people should be maintained. So if you have actual international friends, then you can imagine when a crisis occurs, and you can imagine the general public's reaction, actual reaction, real reaction in your counterpart country. So we understand that most of the Russian people are not Putin, not President Putin. They are much more peace-loving people, or some other Russian people, brainwashed by the Russian government. But basically, we should not hate any people. So make friends.
Great, thank you so much. That's a great message as well, Matsuda Sensei. Well, going into our Q&A session. So for all of our in-person attendees here at Georgia Tech, if you do have a question, certainly come up to the front of the room and you can ask your question. But I will start it off. I think this question would be more for Bani-san, but amid the 50th anniversary of the Shanghai Communique and the ongoing Ukrainian crisis, is there any possibility of U.S.-China relations, reconciling and improving, and how and what kind of things should be sorted out for achieving that?
Well, it's interesting that this questioner referred to the potential for U.S.-China rapprochement. When we think of rapprochement, we think of Nixon's trip to China. And the breakthrough in U.S.-China relations. I hate to be pessimistic, but I don't see really any potential for that kind of turning point and collaboration between the U.S. and China, because it is really hard to imagine anything that would bring those two countries close again. They're not going to cooperate against Russia. I think the odds of that are very, very slim. And so perhaps the two countries can manage their differences. I hope they can. There's reason to be somewhat hopeful that they can work together on some issues where they may have overlapping interests. And we did see the US and China issue a bilateral agreement in Glasgow, on climate change. That's one area certainly where we share some interests. The Biden administration is continuing to try to work with China on North Korea. As Matsuda-san mentioned, it's very dangerous. The North Koreans may be on the verge of firing off an ICBM, which they have not done in many years. So this is an area where, when it comes to nonproliferation, I think China and the U.S. Do share interests. But I just don't see the potential for a really fundamental rapprochement between the two countries. Their strategic interests increasingly diverge. Xi Jinping's ambitions are really quite clear. He really does want to become, I think, the dominant power in the Asia-Pacific, absolutely, possibly even the dominant power in the world. That, I think, is a question mark that remains to be seen. So the most important thing is to manage the friction and the differences and the competition, which I think is going to be more intense over the years to come.
Great, thank you very much. Professor Matsuda, I think maybe this next question will be for you. So in your perspective, will the war in Ukraine change Japan's relationship with NATO, and how will it lead to kind of NATO membership?
Is it Japan's?
Yes, Japan's relationship with NATO, and will it lead to membership in NATO?
I don't think so. I think that Japan-NATO relations has been, improving a lot and gradually sharing the similar threat. And the NATO also raised the question of China a couple of years ago. So I think that Japan and NATO are sharing the similar concern. But I think that the Russian issue is overwhelmed has overwhelmed for I think that for coming years. And Japan is not going to join NATO. NATO is still a regional defense organization. But the common ally is the United States. So I think it's up to US. If US wants to make more coordination and more cooperation among its different allies or alliance systems, I think that more and more corporations may be going to be implemented. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. And then this next question, I think could be definitely be for both of you. So can US, Japan cooperate with allies and partners in mainly stopping Russia's military actions, or if needed, deterring any possible kind of China's provocative actions in Taiwan Strait? What are, I guess, the future possibility of US-Japan cooperation in kind of deterring and stopping aggression, I guess, in the region? Bonnie-san, do you want to take it first, and maybe Matsuda-sensei after that?
Sure. Well, I have not said anything about Taiwan, so maybe this will be an opportunity for me to do so. I think that because of the growing concern about the potential Chinese aggression against Taiwan, there really has been an effort by the Biden administration to encourage lots of other countries around the world to make known their concerns about the threats to stability in the Taiwan Strait. And of course, it was then Prime Minister Abe and Biden that they signed, for, I think, the first of several joint statements between high-level leaders that express concern about the need to preserve peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. And that had not been said by a Japanese leader, I think, since the 1960s. And then, of course, we saw others, the G7, the US-EU statement also contained similar language. And so I think the real challenge, as Matsuda-san said, the urgent challenge, I think, and I think we share the view that it is not a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, but really other forms of pressure that the Chinese are using against Taiwan. We do have to worry about strengthening deterrence. The United States and Japan should be preparing for the potential to respond if China actually does use force against Taiwan and invades. But I'm more worried in the very near term about what we call gray zone tactics. It's the actions that are taken by China that are below the threshold that would trigger the use of force in response. And so we see China using diplomatic and military coercion against Taiwan, and in some ways now economic coercion as well, although not as serious as China's economic coercion against countries like Lithuania and Australia, but they have laid down some markers. And so I think that this is an area where it's hard for the US, for Japan, either separately or jointly, to respond to effectively. But we can step up our own relationships with Taiwan in order to help strengthen its security and prosperity. And of course, one thing we can do is in the economic realm, and Japan, of course, being a member of CPTPP, can help perhaps Taiwan to join. They've already submitted their bid. And I think there's a potential for signing bilateral free trade agreements bringing Taiwan more into the economic life of the region. The United States will be rolling out very soon its Indo-Pacific economic framework. And this is an opportunity, again, I think, to include Taiwan. So we have to think about Taiwan's security in a broader way. It's not just preparing for war. That's important too. But security is connected to economic prosperity. It's connected to diplomatic engagement with the region, becoming a part of the life of the region. And there is certainly more that we can do. We can help give the people of Taiwan more confidence that they're not alone, that they're not isolated. And so I think we've made some progress in that area. And I was really delighted when Japan decided to join the global economic and training framework that the United States created in 2015. And now Australia has joined too. And it's just a wonderful way to work together to showcase Taiwan's expertise and work with experts in Taiwan and around the world. So just one small example of things that we can do.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Matsuda-sensei, anything to add? Or I know you've spoken about this. No.
I perfectly agree with Bonnie. And if I discuss this issue, I have to do this from the very different angle. How to deter Russia or China's possible use of force against, for example, other countries or Taiwan. Basically, U.S. alliance is doing very well because, for example, Russia doesn't dare to attack NATO allies. So Russia's military action against NATO allies is deterred now. And China's attack against Taiwan is also deterred now because the costs and risks are very, very high. For example, in China's case, if it really wants to attack Taiwan, it has to concentrate on Taiwan. But if there is only 1% or several percent of the possibility of U.S. intervention, China doesn't dare to attack Taiwan. So there is another way of thinking that, doing a preemptive attack to US forces on Japan and diminish them, erase them, and exchange with the 2-week time and concentrate on attack on Taiwan. But this is a crazy idea because what China worries is the risk of US intervention, right? But if you make a preemptive attack on US forces in Japan, the retaliation from the United States will be 100%. That's why China is deterred. So the current situation is deterrence is working. So what we have to do is to pose more cost and risks on China. China is developing its military capability. So we also have to do the same thing. So this is not a healthy competition, but since Xi Jinping's ambition is quite clear, I think that we have to do this.
Great, thank you so much to both of you. I know we can be speaking about this topic for hours and hours, and I wish that we had you in person to kind of continue our talks, but we do appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to be part of this program and sharing your expertise. So thank you again. A virtual round of applause to both of you. More about, Babani-san's work. I know you're quoted in many articles. Go to the German Marshall Fund of the United States to learn more about her great work. For Matsuda-sensei, I go to the University of Tokyo's website, and all of his articles and journals are also on his website as well. So thank you again. But at this time, we'd like to ask Ms. Jessica Court, Chair of the Japan-America Society at Georgia, to come up. Some closing remarks. She is also Vice President of Community Engagement and Corporate Communications at YKK Corporation of America, one of the first Japanese companies to come to Georgia. So Jessica, yoroshiku onegai shimasu.
So yesterday, a friend that I have who lives in Osaki in Miyagi-ken, I made this friend because she's actually been one of the key people who's involved with the Dublin, Georgia, and Osaki Sister City Exchange. She posted on Facebook about a program that she led where the students in Osaki, again in Miyagi Prefecture, had a Zoom call with kids in Ukraine. They had this call yesterday. And the topic of their discussion was the kids in Osaki who experienced the aftermath of the tsunami and the earthquake and the great trauma that came with that. You know, students had lost family members, lost homes, you know, lost friends. They had messages of encouragement for the kids in Ukraine. They were holding up flags colored in the Ukrainian flag, and they were telling the kids in the Ukraine, you know, no matter what happens, you just have to, you know, to take heart and to keep moving forward. And I'm just like starting to get emotional because I was looking at these little faces. And apparently the webinar was, you know, the Zoom call was supposed to go on for 30 minutes. It ended up extending for an hour because the kids had a million questions for each other. And then they ended a call with the kids singing "It's a Small World," you know, at the end. And I think, you know, I was listening to everything we were talking about today, and you know, we read everything in the news, and it's so easy to get discouraged these days, but there are also so many stories like that, and there's so many stories, you know, of all these countries coming together and trying to work out these issues. And that's the biggest takeaway that I have from today as well, is that the importance of alliances, the Japan-US alliance and friendship, you know, is so close. And then Japan and the United States working together, you know, to solve these issues around the world. So, so that's precisely why we have to have events like this. And this is why we need to really come together to have these kind of discussions. So I really do want to thank all of you for being here today. This is really interesting. This is like, we've had a few of these hybrid events, but we've got people on the screen up there and I've got people in front of me. It's really great to come back in person though. For those of you who are here, we had these incredible obento. So for all of you that are out there on the screen, I wish you could be here. We had these amazing obento that came from Nagoya. But we definitely want to encourage you to come to some of our other events, whether they are online and in person. And of course, really want to thank all of our wonderful speakers tonight. Of course, Bonnie Glazer and Yasuhiro Matsuda, thank you so much for all of your insightful comments and sharing your perspectives from both sides. That was really wonderful. And of course, the National Association of Japan America Societies, Peter Kelly and Atsushi Tsunami from the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. I also wanted to thank Sasakawa Peace Foundation for the work that you're doing in Poland with the refugees too. That's incredibly important work as well. Also, thank you, Georgia Tech, for hosting us, and the Hotel Indigo Vinings also for hosting another group of people. Again, we're trying to figure this out in hybrid world, and this went amazingly well. Actually, there are really no glitches, so that's definitely a thanks to like all of the people that were helping us. And also, you know, being chair, I suppose that being in the Japanese sense, I'm not supposed to praise my own organization. I have to say thank you to Yoshi Domoto and the entire staff of Japan America Society. These guys work so hard. They work so hard. I mean, there's an event like every day. They did not slow down. I mean, they're just, everything switched to webinars like within like 2 weeks, and we were just full swing ahead. So thank you so much to all of them. And we have a lot of great upcoming events too. Actually, this week on Friday, we have a women's celebrating women who are breaking the biases event. And that is not just a women's event. All the men are welcome to come as well. So that's going to be Friday evening. That is an in-person event only. So for those of you who are here in Atlanta, please join us. And then on Saturday, there's a Japanese Arts Festival at Georgia State University in Dunwoody that's going to be going on all day as well. And just one last thing, I'm sorry, it's just getting a little bit too long, but since we are talking about conflict and, you know, and kind of all the things are not stable in the world, I do want to say just one quick thing about peace. We are in Atlanta trying to build a tower, traditional Japanese tower, to house President Carter's peace bell, which he received in 1985 from a very small town in Hiroshima called Konucho. Konocho's temple bell was actually supposed to be melted down in order to fight the Americans during World War II. It found its way here to Atlanta, and through an incredible series of events came to be in possession of President Carter. And the people of Konocho were so thrilled that President Carter has their bell. They built a replica bell, which now hangs at their temple in their town, and we want to build a replica tower that will properly hang the bell at the Carter Center. So if you want more information about that, you can visit the Japan America Studies website. So thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight.